What's going on, guys? I'm Matthew Paetz, and on this episode of Everforward, we get deep into understanding how to become someone that you're proud of.
3, 2, 1.
September 23rd, 2020, man, was the last time we did this.
Is that pre-pandemic?
It's been like, that was honestly more in the thick of it, I think.
Oh, you're right. I think your house was one of the first ones. I'm like, can I take my mask off?
Yeah. Like, wait, this isn't a Zoom? I don't understand what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hell of a year, man, huh?
Yeah.
I was listening back to our interview, actually, our conversation this morning, I was telling you, just to kind of get caught up a little bit. And from not even having, unfortunately, that many in-person interactions with you since then. Well, the last time I saw it was a couple months ago with Brian. And I was just floored at what I know, the growth that you've had since then. Because that conversation for me, like, it was a takeaway of just really helping me and helping the listener just peel back all the way to the very beginning, which is, I know, your area of expertise and the work that you do. And it was just a great reminder of that. But I'm like, damn. I said, where is he now? Because I feel like it's been a big reset this last year.
Yeah. Oh, man. Is that just an open-ended question?
Yes.
Where is he now? You're right. I mean, this year in particular, and as you're asking it, I'm maybe for the first time really just kind of looking at it from this perspective. And I would say the biggest shift in my personal life is there's really been a significant shift in my and this was intentional, but I'm in it now, of identity. Right? Like, that's been a huge focus of mine for the past several months, but really focusing on like who I'm becoming versus what have I come from, right?
And what happened?
Yeah. And that's been I want to say terrifying, but in the most like grounding of what, like, terrifying because it's bigger than anything. I'm beginning to experience things that I, quite frankly, never thought I would. Always wanted, but never thought I would. Right. So stepping into roles that, I'm really proud to be in a position to trust myself with. Like, I'm currently, as we sit here right now, planning a proposal.
Oh shit! Early congrats, man.
Thank you. So something you may be familiar with that phase.
I mean, I assumed it was probly coming sometime soon. So you guys.
Yeah. So we're right in the thick of that, or at least I am. And the other, with that, comes, if you're going to be a husband, and eventually you're going to become a father. And, for me specifically, those roles were two things that I never thought I would ever have. Not really? Because I didn't think it could happen, but because I was actively avoiding them. And, due to the experiences and the traumas and the fears, and quite like, am I capable of maintaining those responsibilities? And for the longest time, I never thought I was. So this past year has been this shift in doing the work and putting myself in experiences and choosing to, face, fears and all of this kind of thing. Like, I've developed this trust in self now that I'm really excited about, but now I'm beginning to develop that relationship to the responsibility. What does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to be a husband? And assuming those roles even before the circumstance kind of titles you as such. So learning, showing up today as a husband and as a father, and what that means, and like caring about what a future with a family and what that stability and what do I want to create? What example do I want to lead with? And so that's really been the focus of this past year, is like, all right, I'm like doing this thing. So I better get to doing it.
It definitely sounds like you've been practicing what you preach, to walk in the walk and talk in the talk, because the kind of the section that stood out most in our interview I was listening to again was 383. I'll link it down for everybody. Was you were really driving home the point of how you help people and through your work, go from the subconscious observer, subconscious participant to a very conscious driver of our life. That's what I kind of just heard what happened to you this last year, man. In a big way.
I love to describe it as like, going from the unconscious consumer to the conscious creator, and, understanding, how to really go from your pain to purpose or shame to service. Can you tell I'm playing with marketing stuff recently? It's a new conversation as well, but really, understanding how to go into the depths of the parts of yourself, that you believe make you unqualified to have the life that you ultimately desire, and not just go in there and explore it, but understand how to extract the wisdom from it. And then, once you get there, it's okay. Now, how do I apply that wisdom to my future? Because that becomes a whole nother, education in and of itself. And that's where I feel like I've been over the past year is like, taking that information and applying it more intentionally, which basically means that you wake up every day and face shit that scares you.
Well, waking up every day this last year for a lot of different reasons has, I think, for the most of us, always at least presented some kind of uncertainty. I mean, the world has been changing almost every day in terms of what you can't do, what's going on in the media, the news, the good, bad, and the ugly. How have you been able to navigate living through such uncertain times and stepping into more of this kind of conscious driver you talk about?
So the very first thing that comes up is I feel like I've had tunnel vision, and as much as I've, obviously been very aware and have been able to, have my opinions on the things and all that kind of stuff. Right. But what I realized was that no matter what was going on, I had full control of what was going on inside of like my home and my relationship, and really where, that conscious driver, as you're saying, like, where am I taking this vehicle that is my life? And I think so much of that too is like starting a business, and really like learning how to build and scale and go through all those things. Like there was tunnel vision. Like
it's got to be sometimes. Yeah.
I could not think about it. So my world really got smaller during the pandemic. And I think, with respect to, the struggles and the tragedy and all that has inevitably come with this experience, if I'm sharing just specifically from my own four walls, I would say that, what the pandemic gave me versus what it took from me, but what it gave me is tunnel vision, right? It basically removed all of the convenient distractions that I was using to avoid the parts of, myself and the parts of, what building the life I'd be proud of required.
Or conveniences.
Yeah. Because if you look at it, right, like in most cases, throughout the pandemic, like what has been removed from us is our conveniences. Right? And that's difficult, of course. And I'm not, minimizing that by any stretch. But, that's really what a lot of us are being brought into relationship to is like, what's life without these coping strategies or without these distractions? And I think a lot of us didn't like what we saw or felt. And I think many were just unaware of what was even there.
Yeah.
But, without launching too far down that road, coming out of this experience now, this pandemic, I've become much more certain. So in the uncertainties of the world, I've become more certain in myself in the direction that I was going. And that's what I've chosen to really just like be unapologetic about. Because that doesn't change. Again, the roles of father, husband, business owner, like that doesn't change no matter what mandate is or is not.
The roles are the roles are the roles. Yeah. What I'm hearing in there, man, is it sounds like a lot of expansion coming out of restriction. When you got tunnel vision, it allowed you to do the work, to do the things, to go inward. And definitely damn sure in my experiences last year, the more inward I went, the more tunnel vision I had this last year. I've never had this level of expansion in terms of my own thoughts, emotions, healing, business, opportunities, ideas. How can you describe for us, how can we have expansion through restriction?
The thing that comes up for me immediately is this idea of getting clear on who you want to become versus what you want to achieve, right? I think a lot of us have this conditioning and this belief that if I achieve this thing, be it financial, be it relational, be it status, whatever it is, if I achieve this thing, then that will allow me to feel a specific way about myself, right? I will have become something that I'm proud of, quite frankly. Instead of looking at, so if you think about it from this way, like, okay, if it's not until I achieve X that I can feel proud of myself, right?
I'll be happy when.
Right.
Yeah.
Now imagine if you became someone you were proud of, what they could achieve. Right. And that was really the shift for me, is like going from this external, what are the checkpoints I must reach in order to validate myself and feel worthy and capable and credible and all these things. And I found that I was just constantly grinding that hustle, culture, if you will, instead of I should say it this way. And then when I began to understand the difference between achieving and becoming, and I got clear on who I wanted to become, which for me was, and I believe this is true in all of us, but it was really powerful for me, is when I decided that I wanted to become someone that I was proud of. And what becoming does is it brings you to the present moment, because you become it right now. Like, we're becoming it in this conversation. We're becoming it in what we choose to do for dinner tonight. We're becoming it in how we choose to interact with our loved ones, and so on and so forth. So this idea of becoming someone I was proud of, I began to ask myself, especially if I was in let's say I was tempted, by eating like I told myself I wouldn't, or, avoiding the things I said I would do, like working out, for example, which is another conversation. And then even just like in how you want to respond to something that may have triggered you, right? Sure. Whatever the conversation may be for you, getting in the habit of asking myself, what decision will I be most proud of in the morning? And this has been a tool that's completely changed the course of my life over the last year and a half, because I'm intentional when I say in the morning. Because if there's anything that I learned, is like the morning always told the truth. Right? So if you think about, and I'm going to use, some stuff from my life, right? Where, let's say in the past when Alice and I weren't in a good place and I wasn't someone I was proud of, the way in which I would act in those nights where we weren't getting along, right? I would often wake up and, feel shame and guilt and disappointment in myself and all these things.
The weight of the truth hits as fast and hard as the first ray of sunlight coming through the window, I'm sure.
I don't know how many times Allison said it, and every time she was very true when she would say, for a man that had a lot to say last night, you sure haven't said much today.
Damn.
And
sounds about right. Yeah, right? I've been there.
Yeah. Like, and I had to sit with that reality and ask myself, like, is that the man I wish to become? And, and being able to say no. So because of those experiences, I really started to look at, well, how do I feel about the decisions I made yesterday, today? Right? How do I feel about the choices I make today in the morning? And I started to think about, like, okay, so if I began making my decisions, as many as I could, right, from this perspective of, what will I be proud of in the morning? How would that affect my behavior today? And
like reverse engineering that.
Yeah, like it changed everything, right? And I'm not saying, like, it could be one thing. You could be like, okay, I chose to eat a breakfast I was proud of, and the rest of the day was shit. Like, okay. When you wake up in the morning, you can look back and be like, okay, so I made a decision around breakfast that I was really proud of. I can do that again today. And then that leads into, something else. Then eventually it's like, you've probably heard the idea of like habit stacking.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's like you're stacking.
James Clear 101.
Yeah, literally, right? So imagine you're doing that with decisions. So it's like decision stacking, right? And that's really what it is, what a habit is, right? So, made the decision to create a habit of being proud of myself. Right. And that gets to show up in everything I do. It could be the shoes you wore today. You could be proud of yourself for the ones you chose. Maybe you were terrified of what people would think, but you're like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to wear the ones I want. And you did. And you're proud of yourself for doing that. Like, it could be in any little detail. It doesn't have to be some monumental achievement. But that's what taught me how to become someone I was proud of. Because what I learned is if you make enough small decisions that you're proud of, you're going to mess around and become someone you're proud of. And, allowing that to be what governs, where I'm headed has really been the biggest shift. Because I think a big thing too, going back to something you mentioned earlier, is like, I could dive into the trauma stuff all day. I did. I do. Right. But then it becomes, I think so often we're asking ourselves, well, I just want to know why I do the things I do. Okay, well, when you learn why, right, which is fairly easy to get to, but when you understand why, it's okay, now what? What am I doing with that information?
So what has been your now what?
Just simply that, becoming
Just
someone I'm proud of.
Okay.
And what I learned is like, I'm creating a life that I never had. Right. And I think that's true in anyone that really wants to create something different in their lives. You're essentially creating something you've never had, and probably something that doesn't exist as an example around you, at least within your immediate circle. So if you're going to create something you never had, you have to understand that everything you do is going to be unfamiliar. You're hardwired to avoid, unfamiliar, uncertainty.
Danger.
Right.
Yeah,
so you have to then become conscious, like, okay, I'm going to choose to step out and do things that I've never done, right? Understanding that I'm not going to know how to do it, right? Which gets into a conversation of expectations. But, to digress shortly, like, how do you show up to that uncertainty, right? That uncertain future that's you're certain about, right? Like I'm certain about where I'm headed, but I'm uncertain of what that looks like and how I get there, right? The way I like to kind of look at this is, imagine if, we were going to drive across country. Let's say you and I were going to, we're in LA now, we're going to drive to New York City. And, if we make that road trip, do you know every single, road and little town
Pit
that we're
stop
going to,
gas station?
Are you familiar with all of those that we're going to come through?
Not all of them, a few. I've done some cross country in my day, not that far, but
maybe a handful, right? At best. But driving across country, if you think about it, the majority of the time you're in unknown territory, right? But you feel safe because you know where you're going.
You got a destination.
You know exactly where you're headed. You have a direction. Although you don't know maybe where you are in this moment, you know where you're headed. And that's really been the shift. Is like, okay, I don't know what every day is going to bring, but I know exactly where I'm going. And that's allowed me to kind of navigate that uncertainty, that fear, that judgment that I have of myself sometimes, that critical voice. And like, okay, I know where I'm headed. And it's, again, becoming someone I'm proud of and stepping into the roles of, husband and father.
Yeah. Isn't that kind of where we hear most people struggling with the most is, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know my goal. I don't know what I want. I don't know the meaning of life. I don't know, but maybe I'm showing up each day and choosing some right decisions and hoping that it's going to get me somewhere. But I guess to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, like, how do we get there? How do we get clarity on the destination and then find the way if we just flat out don't to begin with?
100% support.
What do you mean?
Find qualified support that can help you navigate that conversation. And in conversations like this one, podcasts like this one, is an element to that support, right? It could be perhaps the key to open up the idea that, this is what you can accomplish, or maybe it's where you go to maintain, the support that you're getting elsewhere. But I think it's impossible for us to create anything we don't have by ourselves.
I agree.
So identifying, who are the people that are at the very least going in the direction that you want to go or that you're interested in. Let's speak to someone that has no idea or feels like they have no idea, which in most cases I often call bullshit. Right? Yeah. The truth is, you have an idea. I'll say this. You have an idea, gut feeling, but it scares you. Or what I often find is that, when people are like, oh, I don't know what I want. What they're saying is, I know what I want. I just know how to get it and not have to go through this bullshit that I know I'm going to have to face. Yeah. Right? So what they don't know how to do is skip the work and still get what they want. So they say they don't know what they want because they're afraid of the work.
Or I think oftentimes too, they're too afraid to say what they really want. I know I've been there. You feel like you're never going to accomplish it. You're not worthy of it. People are going to laugh at you. It's unaccepted. Yeah, absolutely.
100%. And that's what I find stands in the way between most dreams. Right? It's not that people are walking around aimlessly lost and have no idea. The pain they're experiencing is that they have an idea, but they're terrified to pursue it. And that's because of the fear of judgment, abandonment, rejection,
failure,
all of it. Right. Like, and that's why support is non-negotiable. You need to have someone or someone's that you can lean on, communicate with when you're going through those moments and waves of uncertainty. It's kind of like an athlete with a coach. It's like, you need someone that can look at you and understands what you're facing because they've been there.
Yeah.
That's why you don't go to your best friend who's working a 9 to 5 to get entrepreneurial advice.
Usually not. Yeah.
They may not be the best resource. It's not that they don't care, right? But if they're afraid to pursue their own, if they've never started their own business, it's like, so imagine going to, let's say you were raising capital for something, right? It's a big money conversation. And you go to your friend who, believes money's the root of all evil, right? For whatever reason. Probably not the best person to ask and share your fears about raising capital with, because they're just going to meet you with, why are you doing that? And whatever their narrative is.
Meet you with your own fears probably too.
100%. Confirm them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because they believe them, so they must be true. Whereas if you were to go to someone who's, raised however much and launched, several different companies, and you're like, I'm terrified. And they're like, yeah, I get it. No shit.
You should be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what are we going to do? Like, what's next? Right. And like they encourage you to move forward despite the fear versus confirming that the fear is too big. So why even do it?
What you're talking about for me it brings up this fact that I look back on. I give so much credit to growth periods in my life, success of any form. And that's for sure community, but proximity and environment and the frequency and necessity of changing kind of all three of those up. I'm curious with your growth this last year and stepping into this man, this person, this partner, this entrepreneur that you want to become and are becoming. How have you forced yourself into different proximities, forced yourself into different environments? Because that's definitely the big common denominator in my growth this last year.
Environment always wins.
Okay.
Always. You cannot out-intention your environment, right? Like it will always win. And what I mean by that is it may not win immediately, but it will win inevitably. Okay. So knowing this, you can leverage it. All right. So if your environment always wins, well, let's begin creating an environment that supports this version of yourself that you wish to become. Right. So, the idea of becoming a father and a husband, right? I've become very intentional with, even, gentlemen such as yourself, like, even if I'm not in relationship to someone every day, being intentional with putting myself around other men who are equally motivated to become, quality husbands, quality fathers, quality partners.
In those roles and beyond.
Yeah. And aren't afraid to talk about the fears and the struggles they're having in pursuit. Right. And, versus hanging out with the guys that maybe are still, kind of going out and doing whatever and avoiding those responsibilities. Right. Like it's much easier for me to trust myself when I have others that are on the same path.
Has that helped you real quick? Sorry to interrupt you there, but has that helped you better understand maybe where you had judgment showing up in your life? Because I know I did. Whereas I would look at these people of the person I want to become, or even I think I'm becoming, and I'm just kind of fleshing that out. I would look at the people I'm hanging out with versus, old version of Chase, current and new version of Chase. And it helped me kind of realize maybe where I was staying in some of those environments because of judgment of changing, because of what the path the other people were on. Does that make sense? Does that bring anything up for you in terms of becoming and growth and understanding maybe where judgment was keeping you where you didn't need to stay? Yeah.
So judgment really is a tool of the ego, right? Like its whole purpose is to keep you in what is most familiar, not necessarily what is best. Right. And the other thing about judgment that's interesting is you cannot judge something that you don't recognize in yourself. Like if I judge someone for something, it's because there's whatever it is, I see it in myself, right? And this is really a biological conversation, a survival conversation, because, if you've ever heard the joke, probably going to tear it up. It's like if a bear ran in here, like I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you, right? Like that's it. That's how I survive, right? I don't have to be faster than the bear or the threat. I just have to be faster than the person I'm next to. And if you think about judgment, that's really what it is. We're saying like, I don't have to be perfect, but as long as I'm a little better than you, I'm okay. And that's what we're attempting to experience when we're judging someone else, is this sense that we're just a little bit better. all while what we're actually judging is ourselves. Right. Like, for instance, going back to the idea of an athlete, you know, a coach, you know, you have, you know, let's say someone in the stands that's never played the game in their life, you know, why didn't you catch that ball? Or how'd you miss that shot? Right. They're just up in arms about it. But then sitting next to them is someone that played for 30 years and they're like, that was a tough ass shot you took. You know what I mean? Like, you don't make many of them. And that maybe wasn't, you know, an easy one to attempt. Right. But there's an understanding because there's personal experience versus the judgment. Right. Because that person knows he couldn't go out there or she couldn't go out there and do anything they're doing, let alone make that one shot they're talking about. I just went to a Lakers game. That's where all this is coming from. So there's a lot of people around me. I'm like,
everybody's a pro.
Have you tried out lately? Like, you want to talk about it, guy?
Yeah. Why are you up here and not down on the court?
Right.
Yeah.
There's a reason. And I can come up with a few.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're probably true for me too. There's a reason I'm up here.
Very true.
But I think judgment it's more of a tell, right? And if someone's like, well, I don't know what's holding me back. Well, look at what you're judging in other people and ask yourself, you know, does that live somewhere inside of me? Whatever that thing is you're judging, right? Like, you know, have you ever made those decisions before, right? Like, if I judge someone for cutting me off in traffic, if I have to ask, have I ever cut someone off? Probably a lot more than I'm aware of, right? So, all right, there's an opportunity I can give that person grace. You know, and I've done it. So does that make me a terrible human being? I don't think so. All right.
I think it's a really good application. If we took that immediate question or judgment of other people, situations, actions, whatever, and just flipped it or got into a practice of awareness enough to flip it on ourselves first, or at least in conjunction with, be pretty surprising, I think.
Well, I think a way to do that, a tool is whatever you judge, become curious. So if you're like, I don't like that shirt, which is false. I fucking love that shirt. Right. But if I were to say, I don't like that shirt, instead of me just leaving it that, like, I don't like what is it about that shirt I don't like? Is it that I don't have one? Right. Because I could say that, you know, is it X, Y, and Z? But you become curious. And then the more that you're curious about, well, why does that affect me? Why does that offend me so much? Oh, well, maybe we get down to a story where I'm like, oh, there was a time when I wanted the camo jacket as a kid and we couldn't afford it.
Yes.
So fuck your shirt.
100%. And I'm so glad you bring this up because this is where I want to really dive into. I know you recently came back from an experience, a retreat, if you will. And 100%, Matthew, what you were just describing is exactly kind of the conversation that I had with myself, where I would say a realization that forced a conversation with myself a little over a year ago when looking at different walks of life, when looking at different extracurricular activities, when looking at different medicines and different everything, different actions, different beliefs, different everything. And it wasn't until I challenged myself really and just put myself in kind of the belly of the beast, so to speak, I realized heavy where I was just living in judgment. And it was because of so many past experiences like we're talking about. And it's been amazing for me, man, but you're the guest today. So please walk us through how you've had more expansion through these kind of different practices.
Through the medicines?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's funny. Some people are going to hear me call these things medicines, or they hear them called medicines and it doesn't make sense, but, it's been one of the most profound journeys, and, not just have had, but it will continue to be a part of my life, let alone my work. But I've recently, over the past year and a half, worked now intentionally with, and these are all in, very intentional settings, right? So very, none of this was recreational. I'll say that, right? So it was with proper support and understanding and everything. So
proper set and settings,
guidance, the whole nine. So I've worked with now MDMA on 2 occasions, which was, I say, the first one saved my life. The second one changed my life. And then since I also have experienced DMT, psilocybin, which is mushrooms, and LSD, all with the intention of, PTSD, psychotherapy, trauma work. And each one offered something different, obviously. But I would say that what they all have in common is every experience revealed more of me. right? Like it wasn't about when you're in those journeys, right? As you've experienced, like it's not about other people.
No,
It's you're just simply exploring self. So every single journey
and the infinite abyss that is self.
that is self and is everything around you. And it's a whole nother conversation. But it's really profound and it disrupts really this the conditioning. Right. And I think that is probably something that we all could use a little more of, is disrupting our conditioning. But like I said, I mean, I could launch into all of them in different ways, but.
Well, I'm curious, let me ask you specifically then, because this is where I think we have some relation. This is definitely where my audience has heard me talk about most on this topic, is going into something like this with proper intention, safety, your homework, due diligence, whatever you want to call it, I think is an important kind of precedent to be set in anything that we do in our lives, whether you're changing your diet, a workout routine, going left instead of right. I mean, it's just the more awareness and safety you can have going into any situation, I think is going to be the obvious, but also you're going to get the most out of the experience, because it's going to really help especially in an experience like that, facilitate a little bit more control when you're definitely going to step into I won't say out of control experience, but just, it's kind of hard to feel like you're 100% in the driver's seat.
Yeah. The thing that was beautiful for me, and again, with that awareness, I also trusted myself in understanding, how much of these medicines to experience. Because it's very easy to do too much, I think, especially if you've never done and have no idea what the experience is going to entail at all. And you just kind of, just jump into the fast lane, which I've seen someone do. And it was that's a whole nother conversation again. But the thing that I'll say in each one of the medicines that I've now had experience with is that I was conscious in each of them. What I mean by that is like, I'm aware of what's going on while in the journey.
Same.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not like alcohol, for example, where you're blacked out and you're just like, what did I say?
You've got hours of your life missing.
Completely. Yeah. It's quite the opposite, right? It's actually, you're more hyper focused and hyper aware, especially on some of the medicines. And I think that's the beauty, is it allows you to really navigate yourself in a very conscious way. It's a lived experience, right? It's not just this blackout thing where you're like, okay, so did I take, I got to go back and review my notes to see what I actually thought, or, did anyone record that? Instead, it's like, no, I remember a lot of it because I was conscious in it while also having this experience that is, I'll say completely detached from, modern conditionings and ego. And ego is a huge conversation that came up in many of them.
How so? I'm curious for you, because that's one of the first things that a lot of people will tell you, or what most people experience. And for me, damn true, is like almost near immediate or pretty quick, like ego dissolve. What is it? What did that mean for you? What did that feel like? What was that sensation?
So I'll start by this. So the ego, really, if you look at it, is essentially the identity, and oftentimes it's the original identity that we adopted around the age of 7, right? It's that 0 to 6 time frame that we talked about, I think, in the first episode, where you establish over 60% of what you believe you are and what you believe to be true about the world around you. And then the reason why 7 is so specific is because, that's the part, that's the time frame where our brain is beginning to develop the neocortex, prefrontal cortex starting to come online. And that's when we really develop this sense of I. I am here in this world versus this world is like, before then, it's like you think everything's happening because of you. When you reach that stage, you're starting to recognize that you are separate from everything. And you start to form this identity of who you are and what that means and what you're capable of. And so if you listen to your thoughts, right, the ego is not a negative thing, right? It's not something you want to kill when it's not going anywhere. So stop trying to kill it. Secondly,
ditto,
right? Like it's not. But what it is, the way that the analogy that I often like to use, it's as if you were given let's say a guard dog at the age of 7. Right. And that guard dog looked at you and said, okay, this is what you believe you are. This is what you believe you're worth. This is what you believe you're capable of. Got it. And it stays fiercely loyal to that version of yourself for the rest of your life. If you never train that guard dog to understand what you are now capable of, it's just going to defend the story.
To no fault of its own.
It's just doing its job. Right. It's a
analogy.
loyal soldier.
Yeah.
And it will defend you at all costs. Right. So if for example, if you believed at 7 that you weren't worthy of love, because of some experience that you were having in your childhood. Right now, you meet the love of your life. Your guard dog says, not letting them in this house.
No,
right? We're not worthy of love. Remember. So now we're going to, i.e., sabotage or push away or whatever, that sounds like, or whatever, however you want to describe it. So before I get too off track, the ego is really this identity, this original identity that we adopt around the age of 7. Right? So what we believe we're capable of, what we believe we're worth, what we believe all these things at that age is often what's running the show as an adult. So under the medicine, what happens is this, in my experience, is if like, all of the attachments, going back to judgment. So these things I'm attached to, these ideas of what these things mean about me or what I think it means about others or whatever, completely removed. And you're able to, it's not as if they disappear, but instead it's like as if they're unattached from you. And now I just get to look at them almost like a television screen and just kind of explore. Another way I like to describe it, it's like, imagine if you took all of your attachments and it was like a puzzle. And you just dumped it on the table. And instead of judging each piece, you just started becoming curious. Where are the flat edges? Right. And you start to... Why
is this one here? Why does this fit in perfectly with this one and not that one?
And you can just rearrange it, right? It's a big mess at first. Well, that's our belief about ourselves. It's a big old mess. And now under these medicines, you're able to just start to like move these pieces around and actually put them where they belong, right? Which can create this image of your ideal life is the way that I like to look at it. So you're unattached, meaning that you can explore the things that you once judged yourself, the things where you carried shame and guilt and disappointment. And you don't feel those emotions around those things in the experience, but instead you're able to look at them and recognize like, okay, well, that makes complete sense. Or, I recognize that actually no longer serves me and I can see how that's holding me back now. So let me put that piece over here. It's not that I'm eliminating it. I'm just better understanding it. I am intentionally, it's like raising a child, right? Like you're training your ego to become more attached to who you're becoming than it is who you were. Yeah. Right. So it's like you're training that guard dog. Like, again, let's say the love of your life walks in the door, your guard dog's freaking out. What do? You just let it bite him? No, you train it. There's this adjustment period.
I hope you can get to that point.
Right.
Yeah.
And eventually, and if it happens, right now, imagine that guard dog treats the love of your life now as one of its own. It protects it. Well, that's really what your ego does. Like when you're able to teach it through experience, right? And I understand there's a lot of vague conversation, a lot of, well, how do you do that? Right. But in teaching your ego that your future is actually more safe than your past, it begins to protect it more than your past. Right. So imagine how strong your ego has been in keeping you stuck in the old familiar cycles of shame and guilt and regret and whatever, resentment, whatever it was, right? Yeah. How much power it holds. Now imagine if just for a second, if that amount of power was connected to who you want to become. Like, damn, then we have civilians traveling space, right? Like, anything's possible. Yeah. Right. Like it's all of a sudden it becomes unimaginable.
Yes. All the above. I agree. And I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's so wild to me every time I talk to somebody who has gone through these various medicines. Everybody has such a unique individual experience, but yet it's all the same. Yeah. If that makes any sense. And I cannot agree more. But I want to ask, just because I know this is for me very curious and still new, and I'm in love with this new process. But for the person listening or the people out there that are the skeptics, is this a necessary tool, do you think, to really finally put ourselves on the path or the next step on the path to who we want to become?
So I'm going to speak from my personal experience here and say that let's assume that everyone had an opportunity to experience this in a guided, intentional, and safe environment. Right? Let's assume that was the case for every single person. If you could guarantee me that, I would say that this is the one gift I would want to give every single person on the planet. Right. And these medicines have become sacred to me because I've only experienced these particular. I've only experienced them in these settings. You know, I never did the MDMA in a party setting. I've never done LSD in a party setting, or a casual setting. Even these were the only times I've had those experiences. I've done some other shit, right? That's it's another conversation, and that's part of what led to my breakdown. But these medicines in particular, in a guided session, it would be the greatest gift I could give the entire world. And I think that it would significantly disrupt the mental health, the Western medicine of mental health.
Yeah.
So the antidepressants,
the big business of mental
all
health,
that stuff, I think it would eradicate it in months if we were given the opportunity to experience these in a very intentional setting with someone that was qualified to guide it. Right? It's not, because that's the thing. It's not that we'll just take it and sit on your couch and see what comes up, but rather if you're in a setting with someone that understands, like what I've experienced, it wasn't so much the medicine, but it was how I was being guided while in the medicine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Because I was being challenged. I was being called forward. I was being asked to explain and make it make sense. It wasn't just, okay, so we're going to go down this journey and I'm just going to listen to you ramble. Yeah. They would stop. Like at one point he's like, I'm going to stop you, bringing you back. Yeah. Right. And it's all of that is what led to the breakthroughs. Right. Because I think if you just take it, right.
You can get this. I mean, I've done both psychotherapy-assisted psychedelics, and I've done recreational, but I will also say, even to the smallest degree, anytime I've done anything recreationally, it hasn't just been flippant. It hasn't just been like, YOLO, fuck it. It has been very like, here's where I am. I'm with a safe people, a safe group. This is what I'm kind of feeling. I want to change state, not to like escape my problems, but like to step into something and to work on something. It might just be at home or it might be in a clinic sometimes.
Right. And I think I think someone's able to do that when you've done a significant amount of work. And so you can go into that understanding like, okay, I'm going in here with this intention and I know that I can access it in this state, right? Because you've done a lot of your work. I think if someone just goes in it blind, having done none of their work, what could come up could be very overwhelming. Yeah. Right? I saw it happen.
I think there needs to be prerequisites.
Yeah. 1,000,000,000%.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of like training for a marathon. You don't decide you're going to go run, 36 miles tomorrow and just think you can just do it. Yeah. Like it takes training.
I had, and it's so funny you just said training. I've had this experience, to kind of wrap up this part here is, I had this experience recently where I've been going back to like classes and open gym kind of thing. And a workout that I normally would do on my own, totally fine. But I went to this one workout and the coach was there. And like we always know, probably everybody listening knows, if you go do your workout, you can push yourself as far as you want to push. If you go and you're there with a workout partner or a coach, they're going to see things that you can't. They're going to push you beyond what you want to do, get you out of your comfort zone. But then to your point also, they're going to reel you in when they see something that is, hey, not yet, or unsafe or anything like that. And then you get to this new kind of baseline to where maybe you start off with a trainer for your beginning fitness journey, but then do you need a personal trainer every single workout for the rest of your life? Probably not. Do you need this kind of assisted medicine, anything for the rest of your life to have these similar experiences, or at least to put you in a state to think about who you want to become? I don't think so. And that's been my experience.
And I feel the same in relation to the psychedelics. Like I said, they'll be a part of my future, but they don't have to be every month.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful part too, where because you're conscious in these experiences, what comes to you, be it a message or a breakthrough, what comes to you, the part that I found to be so rewarding is that it's after the journey, call it, how you get to apply that into your everyday life. Like it's made me a better partner. It's completely changed my relationship with Allison because it's changed my relationship with myself. Right. And
that's powerful, man. I'm happy for you. That's awesome.
And and that's, like I said, the first one saved my life, quite literally. And and I think that's the beauty in it, is that what comes to you, you get to take with. It's not a what happened here stays here type of experience. And again, because I believe these medicines, so this is kind of how I'm playing with this. I'm curious to see what you think about this. So given that you've had these psychedelic experiences, I believe those are medicines of the soul, right? The expansion that you experience, the freedom, the relief, the healing, all of that stuff, right? So I believe these medicines are medicines of the soul. I believe that alcohol is medicine of the ego.
Ooh, I can get on board with that.
Okay. So if you look at how one acts while drinking, what comes out, right? The defiance, the gotta be right, right? Anger, sadness, the woe is me story, or the FU,
the shadow, the depression,
whatever it is, the ego is on full display. I make jokes all the time right now when people are drunk. I'm like, your ego's showing, because it is, right? And mine more than anybody, right? And that's the thing, is like when you start to look at like, okay, and which is funny because why, ego runs everything, right? It's how we judge ourselves, how we judge others. It's how we compare ourselves, right? It's all ego. So if you look at marketing, it's all ego based, right? And you need to look a certain way or else.
Good point. Yeah.
Right. So, and if you look at how we glorify alcohol, again, it's ego, right? Because if we were to develop a healthy relationship with ego, like you've experienced in those medicines, would you give one damn about half the stuff that we stress over? Try giving a shit about your BMW when you're on MDMA or on LSD. You couldn't care. Nothing matters.
Yeah.
Right. But what's present, and love and connection and all of that, that's the only thing that you experience.
And the work you get to take with you after.
And the work you take with you after, the service. Right. Like all the other things. I'm not saying the things are negative, right. But it's developing a healthier relationship to what and why you're motivated to have them.
Well, damn, man. I know we got to get you back to your work day here, but I'm so happy. First and foremost, I'm happy for you, and I'm so excited for the man, the partner, the entrepreneur, the business owner that you are becoming more and more every day. And again, thank you for sharing this experience with us, because it's not easy. And it's very, very unique and interesting to try to share and to put into words. I totally know what you're talking about, but there are a lot of commonalities that we can drive home.
When the psychedelic conversation happens now, I'm like, have you ever?
Yeah.
And they're like, no. I'm like, okay.
This is going to be difficult.
This is going to sound weird as shit. And I'm aware of that. But someone else, you're like,
got you, bro. Got you, man. Well, Matthew, with all the work that you've done this year, and I'm curious to get your interpretation now, living a life ever forward, stepping into who you're becoming in a really unique way. What does that mean to you this go around? How do those two words kind of fall on you today? What does living a life ever forward mean to you?
I mean, again, it brings you right back to the idea of husband and father. And I'm not saying that I need to become father more specifically, as I shared. I'm planning the engagement, but it's what those roles mean to start. So this relationship to caring versus needing or wanting, right? So that like I need to be a good father, or I want to be a good father. What if I just cared about becoming a good father? Right? How would I show up today if I just cared? Right? Instead of needing Allison to be happy, what if I just cared about her happiness? Right? Or, we could just take this as far as we wish, but this idea of caring. So ever forward to me is caring about the things that I desire versus feeling as if I need or just want them.
I love that, man. I love that. This and quite a few other things. You got me walking away with some things to ponder on myself, man. So I appreciate that. It's been great having you back.